Swedish defense firm Saab wants Canada to buy and build its fighter jets. The firm is pitching a partnership with Bombardier and promising to create up to 10,000 jobs along with it.
The company that makes the Gripen has told CTV News that 10,000 manufacturing and research jobs could land in Canada if Ottawa adds the Swedish fighter jet to its military fleet.
In Canada, to do their own upgrades, to build parts of it, to do final assembly and tests, we, as Saab, we are prepared to do that technology transfer to Canada and support that build-up.
A single decision in Europe has triggered a wave of questions across North America, and the ripple effects stretch far beyond aircraft hangars and defense budgets. Saab's latest move has ignited debate inside NATO, forced policymakers in Ottawa to confront uncomfortable trade-offs, and draw an unmistakable attention from Washington. Canada now finds itself at the center of a proposal that could reshape how Western fighter jets are built, exported, and politically leveraged for decades. The stakes reach into alliance politics, industrial power, and the future balance of influence inside NATO. By the time this story reaches its final turn, the implications become impossible to ignore. When Saab AB began signaling that production of the JAS-39 Gripen E could expand beyond Sweden and Brazil, most analysts assumed any additional industrial capacity would remain limited and incremental. Brazil, through Embraer, already plays a major co-production role for the Brazilian Air Force, and that arrangement had long been viewed as the template for international collaboration. The assumption was simple: Sweden would retain primary control, Brazil would anchor South American production, and the global fighter market would continue orbiting around dominant American programs, such as the F-35. That assumption did not survive long. Instead, discussions accelerated around a far more ambitious concept. Canada would not merely purchase aircraft, Canada would assemble them, integrate subsystems, support exports, and potentially serve as a production and sustainment hub for more than 7 nations. That scale changes the strategic conversation because fighter jet production extends beyond metal and engines. It determines who controls maintenance pipelines, software upgrades, supply chains, and long-term service contracts that last 30 to 40 years. Industrial geography shapes political leverage. The Saab JAS-39 Gripen E represents a different philosophy from the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II. The F-35 was designed as a 5th-generation stealth platform built around deep sensor fusion and centralized digital logistics managed through US-based systems. Its mission data files, software updates, and sustainment architecture tie operators into an American-controlled ecosystem that spans dozens of allied air forces. Supporters argue that this structure guarantees interoperability and cohesion across NATO. Critics point out that the same structure embeds long-term technical dependence on US networks. Gripen E approaches the problem from another direction. Developed by Saab AB in Sweden, the aircraft emphasizes efficiency, lower operating costs, and sovereign control over upgrades and weapons integration. It can operate from shorter runways and even reinforced highways, a concept rooted in Sweden's Cold War doctrine of dispersing aircraft to survive initial strikes. Smaller maintenance crews, rapid turnaround times, and reduced lifecycle costs appeal strongly to mid-sized nations that require modern capability without the expense of heavy stealth platforms. Advanced AESA radar, electronic warfare systems, and networked combat functions allow the Gripen E to compete in contested airspace, while its operating cost remains significantly below that of larger 5th-generation jets. For Canada, those differences intersect directly with geography and budget. The Royal Canadian Air Force must patrol vast northern airspace, including Arctic regions where infrastructure is limited and distances are extreme. Flexibility matters, cost predictability matters, sovereign upgrade pathways matter, yet interoperability with the United States through NORAD also carries immense weight. In 2022, Ottawa selected the F-35 as its next fighter, committing to 88 aircraft built by Lockheed Martin at an initial estimated cost of 19 billion Canadian dollars. The decision was framed as essential for maintaining alignment with NATO partners and ensuring seamless integration with American forces. That number did not remain stable. By June 2025, Canada's Auditor General reported that projected acquisition costs had climbed to 27.7 billion Canadian dollars. When infrastructure upgrades, long-term sustainment, weapons packages, and support systems were factored in, some projections approached 33 billion Canadian dollars. A procurement that began at 19 billion had increased by roughly 75%. Schedule pressure compounded financial strain. In September 2025, the U.S. Government Accountability Office disclosed that the Block 4 upgrade package, ordered by Canada, was running approximately $6 billion over budget and could face delays of up to 5 years. Initial Canadian deliveries remain planned for 2028, yet full operational capability is projected between 2032 and 2034. That extended timeline means Canada would operate legacy CF-18 aircraft while waiting for a fleet still undergoing software maturation. Beyond cost and timing lies the structural architecture of the F-35 program itself. The aircraft relies on centralized digital logistics systems managed through U.S.-based networks that monitor maintenance diagnostics, software configurations, and mission data updates worldwide. Participation provides advanced capability and seamless alliance coordination, yet it also locks operators into a tightly controlled framework. For nations prioritizing sovereign control over upgrades and data, that arrangement can feel constraining. Political developments intensified scrutiny. In March 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a review of the F-35 procurement amid escalating trade tensions with the United States under President Donald Trump. At that stage, Canada had formally committed to 16 aircraft, with 72 remaining under the broader agreement. The review did not cancel the program, but it reopened debate that many believed had been settled. Sweden moved quickly. Saab returned with a renewed Gripen E proposal structured around domestic assembly in Canada, in partnership with Bombardier. The offer extended beyond aircraft delivery. Saab outlined the potential for up to 10,000 high-quality Canadian jobs, substantial technology transfer, and long-term maintenance and upgrade capacity based on Canadian soil. Chief Executive Mikael Johansson confirmed discussions with Ottawa and Bombardier regarding local assembly. Industry Minister Melanie Joly publicly described the proposal as very interesting, particularly given concerns that promised industrial benefits under the F-35 program had not fully materialized. The concept was grounded in precedent. Saab and Bombardier had already collaborated on the GlobalEye airborne early warning aircraft, with assembly occurring in Canada before sensor integration in Sweden. That experience demonstrated that cross-Atlantic production lines could operate efficiently, providing a foundation for deeper cooperation. Strategic demand added urgency. In October 2025, Sweden and Ukraine signed a letter of intent that could lead to Kyiv acquiring between 100 and 150 Gripen E fighters. Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson acknowledged that such an order would exceed Sweden's current production capacity. A capable partner nation would be required to scale output. Canada, with an established aerospace workforce and the largest Ukrainian diaspora outside Ukraine, emerged as a logical candidate. A Canadian production line could support domestic needs while contributing to Ukraine's air defense reconstruction, directly linking Canadian industry to European security. Washington reacted swiftly as speculation intensified. U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra publicly stated that if Ottawa chose not to complete the full 88 aircraft F-35 purchase, implications for NORAD would require examination. NORAD, established in 1957, integrates U.S. and Canadian air defense operations, enabling aircraft from both nations to operate seamlessly across shared airspace. Hoekstra suggested that reducing Canada's F-35 commitment might compel the United States to increase patrol responsibilities. He also characterized the Gripen as offering inferior interoperability compared with the F-35. The comments sparked immediate debate in Ottawa. Vincent Rigby, former National Security and Intelligence Advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, described the remarks as political pressure rather than formal Pentagon policy. Observers noted that public warnings tied to continental defense arrangements blurred the line between alliance coordination and leverage. Public opinion shifted alongside official debate. A December 2025 survey by Ecos Politics indicated that 72% of Canadians supported introducing the Gripen into the Royal Canadian Air Force, either fully or as part of a mixed fleet. Only 13% favored proceeding with the F-35 exactly as planned. Polling does not dictate defense strategy, yet it shapes the environment in which decisions unfold. International trends reinforce the sense that procurement diversification was gaining momentum. Brazil operates the Gripen E through its partnership with Saab and Embraer. Colombia ordered 17 aircraft, joining the program in Latin America. Hungary and the Czech Republic have explored reducing reliance on U.S. systems, while debate in Denmark intensified after Parliamentary Defense Committee Chair Rasmus Jarlof publicly reconsidered aspects of his country's F-35 acquisition. These developments suggest that middle powers increasingly weigh industrial autonomy alongside alliance integration. If Canada evolves into a multi-nation Gripen production hub, the implications extend far beyond domestic procurement. Localized assembly could accelerate delivery timelines by reducing bottlenecks concentrated in a single country. Economies of scale across multiple partner nations could lower lifecycle costs further. Shared manufacturing arrangements create political incentives for governments seeking domestic economic return on defense spending. A distributed production model offers nations greater control over upgrades and weapons integration, potentially attracting air forces wary of centralized digital ecosystems. From an industrial perspective, fighter programs span decades. Whoever builds and services them shapes avionics development, engine integration expertise, software evolution, and export relationships for a generation. Canada's aerospace sector already includes advanced manufacturing capability, skilled engineers, and NATO integration experience. Becoming a central node in Gripen production would anchor high-value supply chains domestically, reinforce technological independence, and position Canada as a significant exporter of advanced defense systems. For Sweden, expanded production strengthens resilience and export flexibility. For NATO, diversification reduces reliance on any single supply chain. For the United States, such diversification modestly dilutes centralized industrial influence that has long accompanied F-35 dominance. None of this unfolds in isolation. Deliveries for Canada's initial 16 F-35 aircraft remain scheduled for 2028. Discussions with Saab continue. Diplomats on both sides maintain careful language in public while negotiations weigh offsets, timelines, and alliance implications behind closed doors. Each option preserves certain strengths and introduces certain compromises. Proceeding fully with the F-35 ensures maximum compatibility with U.S. forces and reinforces Canada's integrated role within NORAD. It also locks Ottawa into higher projected costs and long-term reliance on U.S.-managed logistics networks. Pivoting toward the Gripen E could generate domestic jobs, enhance technology transfer, and expand operational autonomy, while introducing potential friction inside alliance structures increasingly standardized around the F-35 platform. The debate transcends aircraft performance metrics. It revolves around how Canada defines strategic independence within an alliance dominated by a superpower neighbor. Defense procurement merges economics, sovereignty, and geopolitics in a way few other policy choices can match. As 2026 advances, Canada stands at a decisive juncture shaped by escalating costs, industrial opportunity, alliance pressure, and public sentiment. A contract that began at 19 billion Canadian dollars now approaches 33 billion. A major software upgrade remains billions over budget and years behind schedule. A competing proposal promises up to 10,000 domestic jobs and shared production for potentially more than 7 nations. Washington signals concern for NORAD interoperability. polls show strong appetite for diversification. Other middle powers watch closely, aware that Canada's decision could signal whether deeper integration with the United States remains the default path or whether alternative industrial alignments can thrive within NATO. No outcome avoids compromise. No alliance functions without obligation. Canada must weigh cost growth against interoperability, industrial autonomy against diplomatic strain, and long-term sovereignty against immediate security assurances. The deeper issue becomes clearer when looking beyond aircraft specifications and alliance talking points. Who ultimately absorbs the burden of whichever direction Ottawa takes? When national security priorities pull one way and the desire for greater independence pulls another, which principle should define Canada's future? Moreover, in other developments that could reshape North America's economic relationship, Canada's finance minister signaled that hopes for a clean rollback of U.S. tariffs may be unrealistic, suggesting that a baseline levy could become the cost of continuing to ship goods into the American market. The remarks reflected a noticeable shift in tone from Ottawa, acknowledging that the landscape has changed and that access to the United States may now come with a permanent surcharge rather than a temporary dispute. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne spoke in Ottawa shortly after President Donald Trump delivered his State of the Union address, where he laid out an ambitious vision for tariffs to eventually replace income taxes as a primary source of federal revenue. That message resonated far beyond Washington because it framed tariffs not as leverage in a short-term negotiation, but as a structural pillar of American economic policy. When asked whether the president's speech undermined Canada's hopes of seeing duties lifted, Champagne responded bluntly that the global business community now understands the American administration views access to its market as something that carries a price. According to Champagne, every country is paying something to sell into the United States, and Canada, in his view, is paying the lowest price among them. His comments followed similar language from U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, who stated that if Canada wants to continue doing business at scale with the United States, it may need to accept some level of higher tariff in exchange for broader market access discussions, including sensitive sectors such as dairy. That framing signals that Washington sees tariffs as a bargaining tool intertwined with long-standing trade irritants, rather than a temporary measure aimed at specific industries. The immediate catalyst for this new reality was a 6-3 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled that the sweeping tariff policy enacted last April had exceeded presidential authority and was therefore unlawful. Instead of backing away, President Trump responded by invoking a rarely used provision of the 1974 Trade Act known as Section 122. That statute allows the president to impose tariffs of up to 15% for 150 days without prior congressional approval, after which Congress must step in. Under that authority, a new 10% global tariff went into effect on Tuesday, replacing the broader measures struck down by the court. What are your thoughts on this? Share them in the comments below. Subscribe for more and turn on notifications so you never miss any upload. Thanks for tuning in.